Hey guys, how's it going? I'm back here with another video, and today I decided to bring this video where I'm going to be showing to you guys how to build a really simple and quick real-time chat application using Firebase and Firestore. So since I don't know when you're watching this video, I want to make sure you guys know which version of Firebase this is in. This is version 9+, so a lot of videos from the versions before this are outdated. That's why I decided to make this video. And if you want to check out all of the code for the video, you can just go to the description. I'll have the repository for the code over there. Now, before we get into the video, I want to actually do a really quick demo of what we're going to be building so you guys can just have an idea. I want to point out that we're not going to be focusing too much on UI. So the UI is not the focus of any of this. The main focus is just the functionality, like I always do in my videos. However, I still added some CSS, which if you guys are interested in checking it out, it will also be together with the code. Okay, so to start out the demo, this is what we're going to be building, right? So it's a very simple application. It starts out with a simple page, which asks us to sign in with Google to continue. So I'm going to click on this button over here, and I'm going to start signing into my account. I already signed into my account in this page, so it automatically, as you can see, it automatically recognized which Google account I'm signed into, so it didn't even ask me to do anything further. But for you, it might require you to put your email and your password and actually sign into your Google account. But after we sign in, now I'm authenticated as my Gmail account. And it's asking me to type a room name. In this application, if you want to talk to a person, another user, you have to be in the same room as them. So this will allow us to actually have conversations between users from individual groups. So there might be conversations between different rooms that are not connected to each other. That means that we can have many different conversations happening at the same time without interfering with each other. So if I wanted to join in a conversation with a friend of mine, I could put over here that we're going to join a room called, fun room. And I click on enter chat. Now I just appeared over here that I'm welcome to fun room. There's no messages yet, but we can start typing some messages over here. But it doesn't matter because we don't have another account to talk to. So I'm gonna open up another account so you guys can see. Okay, as you can see, I just joined another with another account. We joined the same room. I followed the same process. And if I want to start talking to that person, I could just put over here a message, say something like, hey, and you'll see for me, it appears that I said, hey, and for the other person, it also appears that. So we're in completely different browsers. This is actually not connected to each other. One is logged in with a different account, as you can see. So if I wanted to type over here and say, hey, what's up? You'll see that same thing appears over here. And it's real time, right? So I can say like, yo, and I don't have to click the send button. I can actually just type and press enter. And everything works pretty well, and we're using Firebase to power all of this. Like I said, this is a very simple application, and I wanted to keep it that way because it is more of a beginner to intermediate kind of project where if you want to add more complexity to it, you can do it on your own. But I wanted to keep it simple so that everyone can build something like this. I will also mention throughout the video different ways you can add more complexity to this project so that you can make it, more advanced or add more functionalities to it, whatever you want. So this is basically it for the demo. Before we get into the video, if you could leave a like and subscribe, I would be really happy because it would help push my videos to more people. And with that in mind, let's get into the video. Okay, everyone. So let's get started writing the code for this project. To start this out, I actually have already a project over here, but I basically made no changes to it. All I did was I ran create React app and I deleted a couple of the initial files that come with the boilerplate code. So the only files that we need to get started is the app.css, the app.js, and the index.js. And I also deleted a couple stuff that were like inside of them, but it doesn't change at all. You don't actually have to do that. It will basically change nothing in the overall result of our code. I do that just so I keep my code a little bit cleaner in case I don't need to use some of the stuff. So now you can see that this is basically how my code is being presented initially. We want to install a couple packages just to get everything started. And those two packages, we do that by actually opening up our terminal over here. And I have two terminals, one that is running the code which is this code over here, which as you can see, there's nothing in it. It just says hello world. And the other terminal is for us to install our packages. So to install my package, I'm just gonna first of all say in npm install, and I'm going to install the Firebase package. So we're gonna be using Firebase to power the backend for our code. So we need to install that package like this. We're also gonna be using another dependency called universal cookie. And I really like this because it's basically the easiest way to handle cookies inside of your application in React. So if you ever need to handle cookies, which is something we're going to be doing, I would recommend installing this package. So I'm going to press enter and it will install both packages that are necessary. And while that's happening, I want to start out explaining how our project will look like. So we have our app.js file over here. And if you recall, what happened was initially when you get into the app, it will prompt for you to log in. So we need to set that up with an authentication component that will be doing stuff with Firebase because all the authentication will be handled by Firebase. Then when you log in, it will actually prompt up for you to try to enter a room of which you want to chat in. So that will be a specific part of our app where you have to put the room in and then press a button to go into the chat. And then we're going to have another component which is going to handle everything related to the specific chat. So to start all of that off, we actually need to start with the authentication. But like I said, authentication is handled by Firebase. So we have to come over here and start setting up our Firebase console. So go to this website over here, console.firebase.google.com. You have to be logged into a Google account. So I'm logged into one of my emails over here. And if you go to this URL, you'll see that you can create a new project. You might not see projects like this one's over here, but it doesn't matter. You just click on the button add project, and we're going to be creating a new project that is going to represent the one we're going to create. So we have to put a project name. I'm going to call it chat app, something like this. But you don't have to put the same thing. You can just choose whatever you want. Then I'm going to click on continue. It's going to ask us if we want to enable Google Analytics for this project. It really doesn't matter. I'm going to put no just because it doesn't matter, at least for me. But if you want to, you can add that as well. Then we click on create app and it will start generating our application. I'm going to be back in a second when this is done, just to continue. As you can see, it says that my new project is ready. So I'm going to click on continue. So this is going to open up the actual project, including everything that we're going to need for our integration. The first thing we need to do is click on this thing over here because this is where it allows us to register an app into our project. I'm going to call this the same thing. I'm going to call it chat app. And if you want to set up Firebase hosting, you can click on this, but I'm not going to be doing it for this video. I'm just going to click on register app. This will create an application inside of our project and will also give us a piece of code that we're going to be using to actually connect this project that exists inside of the Firebase console to the code that we're writing. And as you can see, it tells us to install Firebase, which we already did, but then it gives us this piece of code over here, which is amazing because this is what we can just copy, come to our code over here, and we're going to actually create a file over here called Firebase config, which is going to hold this code. Now this code, it's really simple to understand because it's already set up for us. And what it has over here is it has all of our keys and IDs and everything that is necessary to make the connection to the project and the Firebase console. Now, make sure you're grabbing your information and not mine. There's so many times I've made videos like this where people just decide to put the same as mine and think that the code is not working because of that. It's not. You have to put your information. You have to copy the one from your thing over here, not mine. And then what this does is it calls this function called initialize app, and it instantiates this variable called app. Now this app variable over here will be very useful for us to do anything related to Firebase inside of our project. So it is good that we basically just have to copy and paste and have everything set up for us. Now we're going to click over here on continue to console. And that's the basics of our setup. But we do have to actually choose which Firebase services we want to be using. Now there's a lot of services, as you can see over here, and you can actually check all of them out. It's pretty interesting. But the only two that we're going to be using in this course is the Firestore service, which is the database that we're going to be using, and the authentication service. So we're going to start off with authentication because it is the first step to creating our project. We're going to click on it, then click on Get Started, and it's going to open up all the different ways in which Firebase allows you to authenticate. It's pretty interesting, actually. There's a lot of sign-in methods that you can choose. You don't even have to use the same as the one I'm using in this video. But I always like to sign in with Google because it's really simple. I like when websites have this because it's basically everyone has a Google account, right? So it's really easy and quick to get it started. So I'm going to click on Google, click Enable, and you have to choose a project support email, which should be your email or one of the emails you have. I'm just using a random email I have, and then I'm going to click on Save. Okay, as you can see, it says it's enabled, which is really nice because it means it's working. So what do we do now? Well, now what we have to do is we have to go back to our code and actually start writing some stuff. So to get the authentication process fully set up, we have to actually import some stuff from Firebase over here. So we're going to import from, not the Firebase app path, we're actually going to import from Firebase/Auth, just like this. Now, what we're going to be importing from this is two methods, one called the getAuth function, and the other thing is the Google Auth provider. Now, the getAuth is used whenever you want to have authentication in your project, and the way you do it is you just create a variable and export it called auth, and set it equal to getAuth and pass in the app in which you're trying to set up authentication with. Now, the Google Auth provider is a provider that is going to tell Firebase that you're actually wanting to handle your authentication using Google. So if you were using other services, it would probably have another provider that you would use. But all you do is you just create a variable called provider, set it equal to new Google Auth provider, just like this. Now I'm going to save this, and it's pretty much done for how we actually start configuring our authentication. Now all we have to do is we have to actually create the whole page for signing in with Google. Now it's actually simpler than you might expect, and the way we're going to organize this is I'm actually going to create a components folder over here where we're going to have multiple components that we're going to be using throughout the project. Now, the first component we're going to have is the auth component because I want to separate my code a little bit just so we have a more organized project. Now, over here, we're going to create this component called auth. And over here, all we're going to have is we're going to return a div. And this div, I'm going to add a class name for it. But like I said, I'm not going to be showing any CSS or like any of me writing CSS in this video because I feel like it will just occupy a lot of the time in the video that should be mainly focused on functionality, but the class names are referring to the CSS I already wrote. So if you want to check out the CSS that I already wrote and match it with the class names, just go for the code in the description. You can just write the CSS yourself as well if you're interested in that. But for this, I'm going to give a class name of auth, and inside of this div, we're going to add a p tag. This p tag is going to have over here a text saying sign in with Google. With Google to continue, right? Just that simple message that every website has when they have Google authentication. Then we're going to have a button over here. And this button will basically say sign in with Google, right? And we're going to put an on click to it. But this on click is going to call a function called sign in with Google, which we haven't created yet, but we're going to create it right now. So we're going to create this function, sign in with Google. And just like this, we're going to make this asynchronous as well. It's important to know that with Firebase, a lot of the stuff you're going to be working on will be using promises, or in my case, I'm going to be handling them by using async await. So many of my functions will be asynchronous so that I can grab data or edit data on Firebase using the await syntax. So how exactly are we going to integrate signing in with Google with this function? Well, to do that, we have to import some stuff over here at the top. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to say import from, we're going to go back twice so that we can reach the Firebase config file. And we're going to say firebase config.js. Then we're going to import two things. First of all, we're going to import the auth that we created and the provider that we created. Both of them we exported over here, as you can see. Then we're also going to import a function from Firebase/auth, and this function is called sign in with popup, just like this. Now, this function is used whenever you want to sign in with any kind of pop-up, like Google or GitHub or whatever you want to sign in with. But to specify which one we want, we have to come over here. We have to say await. Like I said, we have async await, so we're going to say await, and we're going to say sign in with popup. Now, we specify that we want to sign in with popup using the authentication that we created in this project that is connected with our project, and the provider that we want to sign in with is the Google provider. So we're just specifying which ones we want. Now this will actually work, right? I already have my code running over here. As you can see over here, it's already running. I already ran npm start. So if we wanted to test this out, we could come over here to our app.js. I'm going to render my auth component over here. It automatically imported, as you can see. And let's try this out to see what would happen if I went to the code. I'm going to refresh. Actually, it already appeared for you, as you can see. And it already says that you want to sign in with Google. When I click on this, the pop-up already appears, meaning that it's kind of working, right? Like I said, I'm already logged in, so sometimes it doesn't ask, but sometimes it does. By the way, I'm not using my computer right now, my real computer. That's why some stuff is in Portuguese. But don't worry about that. Just ignore that. So if you want to actually log in, you can just click on the account, but nothing will happen as of right now because we haven't set up anything to happen, right? But it shows to you that it's actually working, which is really good. So what we want to do is we want to actually grab some information from the user that just logged in. So Google will actually log this user in, and it knows that we are logged in, but it can also provide to us a couple information that we can grab by creating a variable called result, for example, and setting it equal to the result of this sign in with pop-up promise. Now, what can we see? Well, I'm going to console log over here the information that we can see. We'll try logging in again, and I'm actually going to inspect element just like this, and I'm going to open up the console. So if I try to sign in with Google again, you'll see it will have the same pop-up. But now, since I already signed in, it doesn't require me to click on my account again, which is pretty good. But you can see it console logged something. It actually console logged a bunch of information about my account. It console logged an access token, my email, my display name, which is really interesting because all I did was sign in with Google. But Google knows my display name, right? It might also give you a picture of the user's account that you might want to use, which is this thing over here. And a bunch of other stuff that that exists related to the account. So what information do we really want? Well, we want to know, first of all, the token, because we want to set, we want to keep the user logged in to their account, even when they, refresh the page or leave the tab or something like that, right? So what we want to do is we want to create a cookie and store that token in the cookie, and that token will be associated with the user that is logged in. So to do that, we already installed the universal cookie library. So we're going to come over here at the top, and we're going to import something called cookies from the universal cookie library. It's pretty simple. This library is actually really simple. Whenever you want to use cookies, may it be setting a cookie or getting a cookie or deleting a cookie, you just import the library. Then you create a variable called cookies and set it equal to new cookies, just like this. And now this thing over here can be used to get, set, and remove cookies from your browser. So in our case over here, we want to set a cookie. Now we're going to call it auth token. And the cookie that we want to set is, like I said, the token, right? Now I'm going to actually set the refresh token to represent by this user. So I'm going to say result.user.refresh token, just like this. And you'll see that now, if I refresh the page, I come over here, I can go to my application over here. You'll see that it says a bunch of stuff about you, including your cookies. And as you can see, nothing really exists over here, right? But when I sign in with Google, it won't ask for my account because I already signed in. You'll see that now a thing called Auth token appeared over here, and it has the token that we needed. So if I were to refresh the page or leave this thing, the token would still exist over here, which is pretty great. So now we've set that up. What exactly are we going to do? Well, since we're using async await, I just want to have some error handling just so that we're secure that everything is working. So I'm just going to put a try and catch over here. And we're going to catch for any possible errors. And if there's an error, I just want to error that into our console, right? Pretty simple. Now we pretty much have our authentication done. So what exactly are we going to do now? Well, we're going to come to our app.js, and I'm going to actually divide our app into two parts, right? One part is when you're not authenticated, and one part is when you are authenticated. So to recognize or know when the user is authenticated or not, we can actually just create this state called isAuth or something like that, which is going to be used to represent whenever the user is authenticated or not, taking into account the fact that they might have been authenticated previously and grabbing that information from the cookies. So how exactly, what do I mean by that? Well, we're going to create this state, call it isAuth, and the function set isAuth. And we're going to run kind of similarly to what we're doing before, where we're going to grab the cookie, import information over here. And we're going to basically put the default value for this to be the cookies.get an auth token. So if there is an auth token anywhere in this app, then it will be this isAuth is going to be true. If not, it will be false or just being represented as true or false, right? So with that, we can come over here and we're just gonna ask, okay, if is not isAuth, so if the user is not authenticated, then we want to demonstrate, we want to render the auth component, because that's where we're going to show them the authentication process, and they can authenticate based on logging into their Google account. But if they are authenticated, then we don't want to show the authentication stuff again. What we want to show is some other stuff. Now, what do we want to show? Well, first of all, we want to ask them to type in the room name that they want to join. So what we want to do is we want to create another state called room, right? And this room state is a little bit different from what you might be expecting, because it will indeed represent what room the user typed in. You can see it's a string, but we're going to grab it a little bit differently, because we're going to ask over here, okay, well, first of all, is room empty or not? So is room actually null? It's better to say if it started out as null. Is room null or not? Because if it is not null, it means that we want to display the chat, which for now, I'm just going to represent it as a div saying chat. But we're going to create the chat component in a bit. But if it is null, it means that we want to ask for the user to type in a room. So we're going to add in over here another div that is going to contain that input and button to type in the room ID or the room name that they want to join. I'm going to add a class name for this as well. It's going to be called room. And over here, we're just going to add a label saying something like, oh, I hate when Prettier creates all these brackets. I'm just going to delete some of them, just like this. But over here in the label, I'm just going to say enter room name. And then we're going to add an input, just like this. Input, just like this. And then we're also going to have a button, right? That is going to be enter chat. So now you'll see that we have all of this. And by the way, I already added some of the CSS in. That's why you can see some of the stuff already has some CSS. But again, ignore the CSS for now. We're only focused on functionality. Sometimes in the video, I'm going to stop just to add more CSS because not all the CSS has been added yet. So the appearance of the website might be changing as we go. But basically, now we have this label saying enter room name, an input, and a button. So what do we do with this? Well, we want to keep track of what the user is typing, right? But the thing is, if we were to do that, if we were to, like, for example, whenever there's a change in this input, we would change this room state, that would actually cause some issues, because immediately when the user typed a letter into this input over here, it would already set a room to be true, meaning that this would already disappear, right? So I'm going to show you guys what I mean by that. If I were to come over here like a normal person and add an on change to this and grab the event, just like you would normally do, and say set room is equal to event.target.value, like you might be expecting, and I were to come over here and start typing, by the first letter I type, it would set it to false, right? Because it is false, because now room has a letter. So what we want is we want to never change the value of room to what is in the input until we click on the button. So how exactly would we do that? Well, we would do it by, instead of using an onChange functionality to set the room, we're actually going to use a hook called the useRef hook. This is another method of grabbing data or what a user types in an input by using a reference. So we're going to say useRef over here and create a reference to the input by saying room input ref and set it equal to useRef, just like this. I'm also going to set this to no initially. Then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say that the input has a ref, and I'm going to reference this input by using the room input ref. Now, when you try to enter the chat, all you're going to do over here is you're just going to set the room state to be equal to the room input ref, which is now a reference to the input, dot current dot value. So we're grabbing the value of the input and setting the room to that. So we're kind of delaying the process of updating the room state to be equal to the value of the input by doing it this way. And you'll see that now I can type on this whatever I want, but it will actually only update the room state when I click enter chat, just like this, which is pretty cool. So now that we've kind of set up the functionality, we're being able to keep track of the room, and whenever you enter the chat, it actually renders this UI over here. We're getting pretty close to starting to write all of the stuff related to the chat, which is really cool. Also, you might have noticed that it doesn't matter what happens. If I refresh the page, it will always get me stuck into this page. It doesn't go back to the auth page. And that's because we are authenticated and we have the cookie over here, right? Set up. But if I were to delete this token, just like this, and refresh the page, we're now prompted to log in again. And then we can follow all the process that we've been doing it so far. We try to log in, we log in, then not automatically yet, it shows us the same page, but if we refresh, it will actually show us the room page, right? The problem now is how would we transition from the authentication page to this one automatically without having to refresh the page, right? So to do that, I'm actually gonna delete the auth token again, just like this, so that we can go back to not being authenticated. And all I have to do is I actually have to grab this set auth state that we have and take use of it, right? So when I basically say that whenever you finish authenticating, not only we set the cookie to be equal to the auth token, but we also want to set this state called setIsAuth to be true. So to do that, we need access to the state inside of the auth component, which means I'm going to be passing this state as props to the auth component, just like this. And I'm going to grab it like this. Then I'm going to destructure the props just like this. You don't have to do it this way. You can just grab it from the props, but I like doing it like this. And then I'm going to set isAuth to be equal to true whenever you log in, just like this. Which means that now if I click on sign in with Google and I sign in with Google, when it finishes authenticating, it will set isAuth to be true, which means we automatically get into our own page where we can enter our room. And if we want to, we can put a room name over here and enter chat. And now we are inside of the chat. So the website, the app mechanics seems to be working. we now got to the best part, which is creating the actual chat app. So how exactly are we going to do that? Well, to do that, we're going to create a component called the chat component, chat.js. And this is where all the magic will exist. I'm going to export a component called chat. And inside of here, we want to return a div, which I'm going to give a class name. This component has more UI than others because it is the chat and it has to look remotely good for at least for visual appealing purposes. So I'm going to add more class names to this one, but this is how the chat will work out. For now, again, I'm just going to type in chat, and I want to replace this over here with the chat component, right? It automatically imported, so if you don't forget, if yours didn't, to import this component into the app.js. Now, you see, if I type in, it still works, still says chat, but now it's being rendered from this component over here. So what do I want to do? Well, I could go through this and show you guys in two different ways. I could show me writing the structure to the UI first, or I can show you guys how to set up the database first and set up all of the data stuff first, and then set up an UI so that you guys can have a better idea of what we're doing with the UI, since we will already have seen the data. I think I'm going to go with the second approach because I feel like it's more intuitive. So like I said, we're going to be using Firestore, which is Firebase's database, one of the databases they provide, to actually set up our chat. So I'm going to click on Firestore over here, and it's going to open up the Firestore console. Now, Firestore is really simple and really cool to use, in my opinion. If you want to set it up, you just click on Create Database. Then it's going to ask for whether or not you want it to be in production mode or you want in test mode. Now, if you're going to actually use this and publish this, you definitely have to do it in production mode, but there are a couple configuration stuff that you would have to set up, such as rules and stuff that I have mentioned in previous videos. If you're interested in checking them out, I can link them in the description. But since this is a personal project, I'm just going to click start on test mode because there's a lot less configuration that you have to set up. So I'm going to click next. And it's going to ask us to set up a location of where we want to create the database. The location is really important because the closest the database location you choose is to where your users will be making a call to the database, the faster the connection will be. So they have a lot of options. I'm going to choose this one over here, which is United States, the closest to me, and then click Enable. Now, when you click Enable, it will start setting up everything for us. And I'll be back in a second when it's done. Okay, as you can see, it finished creating our database. Now, with the database, you can create different collections. Now, if you're familiar with something like MySQL, a collection is kind of like a table, right? It's just a part of your code or your project that you want to have data. So in our case, we want to have data about the messages that the users are sending to each other. So we want to create a collection with an ID called messages, just like this. Then I'm going to click on next, and it's going to ask us to create a simple document. Now, a document is like an entry to our collection, which in SQL terms would be something like a row of your table. So Firebase asks us to create a simple one just to initialize it, but I don't really care. We're going to create it in our code. So I'm just going to click save, and you can see it created our collection like this with our first document. Now this document, since we didn't put anything in it, I'm just going to delete it. I'm going to start out with an empty collection called messages. Now, what we have to do now is we have to go back to our code, and we have to connect our Firebase project with the Firestore database. To do that, we're going to go to our Firebase config file again and just add a little bit more of code so that we can get this set up. So it's actually pretty simple. We have to import over here at the top from another part of Firebase called Firebase, or just Firebase/Firestore, just like this. And we want to import the get Firestore function. Then with this, we can actually create another variable called db for database and set it equal to get Firestore, and we just pass in the app. So you see a lot of the functions and stuff related to Firebase are pretty similar, right? We create the variable and then we set it equal to get something and pass in the app. And just like that, we have a connection to our Firestore database. It's pretty simple. We're gonna just close this right now and come back to our chat. Now in our chat, I want to start by actually adding the functionality of creating a new message. The reason why I want to do that first is because to actually get the messages in real time, we have to have messages in our collection, which we don't have right now. So I'm going to start out by adding the functionality to create a message to then add the functionality of receiving those messages. So over here, we're just going to set up a little input called, actually I'm going to add a form. We're going to be using a form for this. So I'm going to create a form, which we can add a class name to the form. And the class name will be new message form. And over here, we're just going to add an input to this form. Now this input will have a couple stuff. So first of all, it's going to have a class name. Like I said, it's going to be called new message input. Just like this. It's also going to have a placeholder because I like adding placeholders to inputs. And it's going to say something like type your message here. Then what I want is I also want a button right over here, which when clicked will actually send the message. So send. I'm going to add a class name called send button. And since this is a form, we have to submit the form by adding a type to this button, and the type will be submit, just like that. Now, obviously, since this is like a form, we do have to create a function called handle submit form or something like that, or just handle submit. And this function will be the part of the onSubmit of our form. OnSubmit is equal to handle submit, just like that. Now, over here, we're going to grab the event from this form, and we're going to start out by saying event.prevent default, which is something you have to do so that since you're submitting a form, you don't want the page to reload. So we're just going to say event.prevent default. Then what I want to do is I want to keep track of what is being typed in this input. Now we're going to do it a little bit different from what we did over here with the room, where we used the ref. We're going to do what I said, what I mentioned previously in the tutorial, which is we're going to create a state over here at the top called new message and set new message. And this state will represent what the user is typing in this input. So in the input over here, we're going to put an on change that whenever there's any changes in the input, we're going to set the new message to be equal to whatever the input currently has as a value. So event.target.value, just like that. And now we're keeping track of the new message being typed. But the thing is, what do we do with that message? If I were to just console log the new message, you'll see that as of right now, what we have is we have an app that has this input in the chat. We're currently in the chat, right? That it has this input and this button. If I type something over here and I click send, it just console logs what we typed over there. So how do we send this message to our Firestore collection? Well, to do that, we're going to come over here to our handle submit, and we're going to actually, first of all, check to see if the message is empty. We don't want to be able to send messages that are empty. That's an important check that we have to make. So I'm just going to say if new message is empty, then we don't even want to look further into this function. We just want to return and end the function so that we don't accidentally submit something to our database, which is an empty message. Now, after that, we actually have to import something from Firestore. So I'm going to import from Firebase/Firestore, and we want to import a function called add_doc. Now, like I said, a doc or a document is kind of like a row in a database table. So it's just an entry into your collection. So in this case, it would be one message in the table or in the collection of messages. So the add doc function, as you might expect, just adds a document to a collection. Now, to use it, what we have to do is, first of all, we have to make this async await. So we're going to make the function async, and we're going to say await. Then await add doc. So we're going to add a document. Now, we have to specify which collection we want to add a document to, because we might have multiple collections, right? In this project, we're just going to have one, but in a normal project, you might have multiple. So to make a reference to which collection you're talking about, you actually have to come somewhere in your app over here. I'm going to come just like here and create a variable called messages ref, which is a reference to the messages collection. Then set it equal to collection, which is a function that you import from Firestore. And you're putting over here the database that you created, the database variable that you created in the Firebase config. And then the name of the collection, which is in our case, messages, the same name we put over here. Now we made a reference to that collection. We can just copy this and paste it inside of our add doc, just like this. Now, what do we do now? Well, you not only have to reference the collection you want to add the document to, but you also need to put in the data you want to add to that collection. And data in Firebase is, or in normal NoSQL databases, is an object, right? And the object will be however we want it to look like. But since we want to keep track of a lot of stuff related to the messages, there are specifically four things that I think are necessary. First of all, I want to keep track over here in each message, the text, obviously, the specific message that we're trying to type. So I'm going to create a field called text, and it's going to be equal to the new message, so what the user is typing. Then I want to keep track of when the user created that message. So when the user typed that message, because then we can order the messages by the time it was created, which is important. So to actually do that, we can do it in many different ways. Firebase actually does it pretty simply. If you import over here from Firestore, there's actually a function called server timestamp, which is a timestamp from Firebase, which when you call this function, it will just set this to be equal to the time in which this message was created. Then what we want to do is we also need to keep track of which user typed this message, right? So if I'm typing this message, I have to be the user that is authenticated to this account. So to grab the name of this user, I can just say auth, and I have to import auth, which I already did over here. Then say auth.current user, which is a field in the auth variable, .display name. And this auth variable, I don't know if I mentioned, you can get a lot of information from the user that is logged in by just using it just like this. So we're just setting the user to be equal to the display name of the user that is authenticated. Now, what I want to do is, I also want to specify which room this message belongs to, right? Because there could be multiple rooms. So the room that I want to have is equal to the room that exists in our app.js, right? This variable over here. But we don't have access to it in our chat. So the way we do that is we just pass that room variable as props to our chat, just like this. We're going to save this, and then over here we're going to grab the props, and like I did before, I'm going to destructure the props just like this and grab the room. And then with this, we can just set the room to be equal to the room, or in JavaScript, you don't, if both things have the same name, you don't even have to put the colon over there. You just do it like this. So now we're being able to actually add the document, which is pretty cool. After you add the document, you also want to empty out the message state and make it empty, just like this, right? Because you just send a message, so you don't want whatever is typed in the input to still be there. One thing I also want to do is to actually make this empty the input. I also have to set the value of this input to be equal to the new message state, so that when we change it to be empty, the input value will also empty out. So I think this should be good to actually start adding some stuff into our Firestore database. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to refresh this. I'm going to join a room. Let's call this room 1, something like that. I'm going to click on enter chat. You see our Firestore collection is empty, but when I type a message over here, something like hey, and I click send, we don't see any errors in our console. The thing was emptied, and as you can see, we have a document in our collection. This document not only includes when the message was created, but also the room name, the message text, and the username of the user who created this message, which is amazing. Now, we can create more messages. I'm just going to create more so that we can have more to test it out. Just random stuff. And you can see it will continue working. It keeps updating and receiving that information inside of our collection. So we kind of have that part of the functionality done, right? What I want to do is I want to add some CSS so that this doesn't look that ugly. And to do that, I'm just going to actually create a folder over here in my project called styles, just like this. And I'm going to create a file called chat.css. Now, like I said, I already wrote all the CSS for this. So I'm just going to copy and paste all the CSS that I wrote inside of here. And as I continue writing my code and adding the class names to the stuff, it will start looking better and better, right? If you want to check out the code, it's going to appear in a second. Okay, as you can see, this is the CSS that I wrote for the chat.css file. I'm going to close it up. So as we progress writing our code, it will start looking a little bit better, which is good. So I just have to actually import this file on the top over here. So I'm going to import, go back twice, then styles/chat.css. And you'll see the changes will start appearing. As you can see, it looks ugly right now because we actually haven't added a lot of the UI, but you can see the styles are working in our website. So now we do have the messages being created, but how do we receive the messages automatically whenever a message appears into our database? Because that's the whole point of a chat app. It means that you're getting the data automatically, consistently whenever there's any changes. Well, what we do is we actually write some code so that Firebase will be listening to any changes in our collection. And to do that, we have to actually create a use effect over here. Just like this. I'm going to create a use effect. Now, with this use effect, we're going to use this function from Firebase called onSnapshot. OnSnapshot, just like this. And this function will allow us to listen to those changes. So I'm going to say onSnapshot, just like this. And this over here requires two things. First, it requires a query that we want to listen to. So like we have to specify, write a Firestore query that is going to specify what changes are we listening to, so that whenever there's a change to that, we can just like reproduce those changes inside of our website. So to write that query, we're going to create over here a query message. So we're going to say query messages is equal to query. And query is a function from Firestore. Now, a query is a little bit weird to understand, but hang on, it's going to make a lot of sense in a bit. First, we have to specify which collection will this query exist in. And it's obviously a query to the messages. So I'm going to put messages ref, which we already created over here. Then we have to specify different parts of what we want to query from the collection. So there's functions in Firestore that allow us to specify different conditions from our query. The first one is the where function. And where allows us to say that, for example, I want to query messages from this collection where a certain condition is met. Now, what condition do we want to be met over here? Well, I want to only grab the messages from the room that we're in. So I can say that the different messages will have different rooms, right? So I can only grab the ones that are from my specific room. Or in this case, the room equal to the room prop that we get over here. So I'm just going to say, I want to query stuff where room is equal to the room that we get from the props, just like this. And you'll see that with that, we can actually put this query on our snapshot, just like this, query messages. And then with this, we can grab a callback function over here, which will run every time there's any changes to this query. And we can grab that information or the data related to the query by grabbing this variable called snapshot. And we'll console log right now just to test out to see if it's actually listening to it correctly by saying something like new message. And this is where we're going to start actually using two different accounts to test out if it's all happening in real time. So I'm going to be back in a second when I have logged into two different accounts. Okay, as you can see, I just opened up another tab. They're not connected to each other at all. They have different cookies, different everything, especially because they're in different Google accounts, as you can see. So this one is in one email and this one is in another email. So I logged in to both accounts separately. And now I just want to put the same room for both of them. So I'm going to put over here, I think the name was room 1. I'm going to enter the chat. And on this one, I'm also going to put room 1 and enter the chat. Now, what I want to do is I want to open the console log for one of them, right? Just like this. And yeah, okay, so we already got two of them because we did have two messages. So what I want to do is whenever I type a message on this account, there should be a console log on this one because there will be another message and our on snapshot over here should listen to the new message and should console log the new message text. So let's see if that's actually working. I'm going to type something over here. I'm going to press enter and you can see new message appears again, which is amazing. It says twice because it's just use effect runs twice. So that's why it's appearing twice. It doesn't mean it's two messages, but it's crazy that on this account, whenever something happens on this, it causes a change on this one, which means it's properly listening to the changes. Now, all we have to do is we just have to handle those changes correctly. And it's a bit confusing the way that you grab the data from those messages using the snapshot variable, but it's going to make sense in a bit. So the way we do this is we actually have to loop through every snapshot. So I'm going to say snapshot.forEach. This is an array, and you can grab the document from each element in that array. Now, to grab the data from the document, it's a bit confusing. The data exists inside of this object that comes from a function called data. And to actually make this work, we have to create an array over here called messages, set it equal to an empty array, just start it out. Then for each snapshot, we're just going to push to that array a new element. And the new element will be an object that will contain all the previous data from the document. So I'm going to say doc.data, which is what I just said. And we also want to add an ID so that we can differentiate them from each other. Now, the ID doesn't exist inside of doc.data. It exists on doc.id. So that's why we have to differentiate it like this. I'm going to create a field called ID, and I'm going to say doc.id. Now, if this is confusing, don't worry, it is super confusing. It's just the syntax for Firebase and Firestore to make this work. But if you really dissect what's happening here, it's just that you can grab the data from the document by saying doc.data. So you're just setting the new object of messages to be equal to whatever the data exists in the doc, plus this new ID field, which we will get from saying doc.id. If ID already existed inside of doc.data, all we would be doing would be messages.push doc.data. But since that's not the case, we have to do this weird looking thing over here, which is fine. So after we loop through every element in the snapshot and we push them to the array, we just want to update a state, keeping track of all the messages so that we can see the changes happening in real time. But we don't have that state so far. So we have to create that state by creating a new state called messages, just like this, and set messages. And this state will be an array. We're going to say use state, an array. And we're just going to set messages to be equal to the messages that we just created over here. Now, we can actually test out to see if this is working by coming over here to somewhere in our code And I'm actually going to just say messages.map. And for each message, we're going to grab the specific message. And we're just going to return an h1 tag saying the message.text, which is the actual text message that we typed, right? And if I save this, hopefully it should be displaying, which is exactly what happens, right? This is all the texts that we actually typed. And if I type more, you'll see that it will appear on both of them, right? Which means our typing system is working indeed. But there's a lot more to be done, right? So obviously we don't have the names of the user who typed. We don't have a lot of that stuff. So we're going to add that in a bit. But one thing I want to do is whenever you have a use effect like this, which is, for example, starting or subscribing to a listening service, such as onSnapshot, you have to clean up your use effect. So the way we clean up is whenever this is done, we're going to grab this function called unsubscribe, set it equal to onSnapshot. And when the use effect or the component it's done completely, we want to return and clean up the use effect, just like this. Now, unsubscribe. Wait, am I writing this wrong? Unscribe. Did I call it unscribe? It's unsubscribe. Unsubscribe. Just like this. And we just close the parentheses like this. Now, if you're not familiar with cleaning up your use effect, I would highly recommend watching my use effect video because this is really important. But you might not see the changes. Like it might not make any difference in the looking at right now, but it can cause a lot of leaks and issues with performance if you don't clean up your use effect. So now that we've done this, let's start building up the skeleton UI for our messages so that they don't look like just a bunch of text as they're looking right now. And this will also add to a lot of the CSS that I already wrote. So what do we do? Well, first of all, I want to change this a bit. So I want to add a header to this whole thing, which is going to display the name of the room. So I'm going to add a div. This div will have a class name called header. And over here, it's going to have an h1 tag, which will have, basically, it will just say welcome, like this, welcome to, and then we want to put the name of the room. So I'm going to say room, just like this. Now, the name of this room is room 1, and I like to keep everything capitalized, maybe. I remember that's what I did when I was doing the demo. If you want to capitalize this, you can just say to uppercase, and it will capitalize the name of the room no matter what, just like this. Yeah, I'm going to leave it like this. So it will just say welcome to room 1 for both of them, right? Then what I want to do is I want to create a div for the messages, which we already kind of did over here, but I want to add more to it. So I'm going to add a class name to this, call it messages, and you'll see some of the UI is already appearing, right? Then I want to add, let me see, I want to add, for each specific message, I want to add a specific div over here. And this div will have a class name of probably message. And we also need to put a key to it, just because it's standard in React. And the key will just be the ID of the message, just like this. Then we want to add a span over here inside of this div to display the name of the user who typed it in and also the message that they typed in. So I'm going to add a class name to this span called user, just like this. And this is only going to represent the username. So we're going to say message.user. And in my CSS, when I grab the class name user, I make this bold so that we have the bold name of the user and the non-bold text, right? And right next to the span, I'm just going to put the message.text. And this is how it's looking so far. We have the name of the user in bold, which is the span over here. And we have the text that they typed in right over here. I can also add something like, I don't know, an asterisk and then the timestamp for the message. So I can say message.created at if I wanted to. And this is how, wait, why did it break? Let me see. maybe, oh, because it is a date, so I would probably have to translate it into text. But my whole point is you can add the text for the created at if you wanted to. I don't think it looks good. I think this way over here looks a little bit cleaner. I was logged out of the room, but I'm gonna go back, room 1, just to show you guys. It does look kind of cleaner this way, in my opinion. So this is how I'm gonna let it stay. But I want to point out something real quick that I'm sure you guys haven't noticed yet. The order of the messages are not right. So if I type something over here, there's no guarantee that it will actually appear together. You see, I just typed something else and it appeared at the top. I'm going to type different messages like, hey, what's up? So you guys can know what type of message I'm typing. See, this one appears at the bottom, but then again, if I put Pedro, this one didn't. This one appeared over here. And this is just not how a text message system works, right? Because that would be really confusing. So the reason why this is happening is because it is random, the order. We're not specifying which order the messages should come on. So we have to do that. And to do that is a bit complicated in Firestore, because Firestore actually has this function called order by, which if we wanted to, we could just put over here created at, and we would basically be saying that when we make this query, we not only want to specify and only grab the messages where the room is equal to the room that we're in, but we also want to order that information by the time it was created. The problem with this is, for some reason, Firestore doesn't allow by default for you to have an order by function in a field that isn't equal to where the other specifications you have. So I could only order by the room because I'm specifying that I want to grab the messages where the room is equal to room. You know what I mean? That's a little confusing why they do it this way, but there's a workaround to this, which is by creating what is known as an index. So how exactly are we going to do that? Well, I'm going to come over here to my Firestore, and I'm going to go to query builder, just like this, just to show you guys what they recommend us doing. So we come to query builder, and this is actually a way so that you can create something similar to what we did over here, a query, and test it out to see if it works before you write the code. So I could come over here and say that I'm trying to run a query in the messages collection, right? And then I can add something to the query. I can add, for example, a where clause or a where operator, which I can specify that I want where the room is equal to something like room 1, right? Which is the room that we have all of our messages. If I run this query, you'll see it works. It returns all the messages with the room equals to room 1. If I were to change this to say something like room 12, you will see it would be empty because we haven't created any messages on a different room other than room 1, which is pretty cool, right? So we can test out queries just like this. But if I were to add order by over here and say that I want to order by the created at field, it will actually tell us that this doesn't work and that we should create an index. So I'm going to click on this link, which refers to where you create an index. It brings us back to the Firebase console, and it generates the index for you, kinda. So all you have to do is just click over here and create index, and it will start generating this thing for you. Now, this index doesn't happen automatically. As you can see over here, I'm going to go to composite. Yeah, it's starting to be created. It has a status of building. And last time I did this, it took like, I don't know, 3 minutes to build. So I'll be back in a second when this is done building. Okay, as you can see, now it says that it is enabled, which means it should be working. The way we're going to test this is by going to our data over here, and we're going to go to the query builder, make the whole query again. If it's not already there, it's not already there. So I'm just going to add to query, put the same where clause that we had before. So where room is equal to room 1. And now we're going to add the order by created at. And we can see that now if I try to run this, it will actually work. See, it's showing the stuff in the actual correct order. But not only that, it doesn't give us an error like it was giving before, which means that now if I were to come over here and I saved this, it wouldn't break anymore. It would order this properly. So you see, now it's ordering it properly. I'm gonna even test it out by just pulling this up like this, and we're going to be typing the messages. So I'm gonna type over here, hey, how's it going? How's it going? You see all the messages are in order now, which is perfect, right? So now what do we have to do? Well, first of all, I wanna be able to sign out, right? Because like if you log into an account, I can refresh this page over here and I can go into a different room, right? I can put over here room 5, and the messages are different, right? Room 5, the messages are going to be different. But the thing is, I'm still not being able to log out. Even if I refresh the page, I would have to manually go there and delete my cookie, which is not something that I want. So in order to fix this, we're going to come over here to our Visual Studio Code, and we're going to add what is known as sign out functionality to our app. But the thing is, I want to have that sign out both on the both on this part of the app and yeah, on either part of the app. So on these two parts over here, I want to be able to sign out, right? So the way we're going to do this is I'm actually going to make this into not a div. I'm going to make this into an empty tag like this. And I'm going to add a button over here. Or actually, I'm going to add a div over here right at the bottom, which is going to be the sign out div. So I'm going to put class name sign out, just like this. Now here, we're going to put the button. And this button will just say sign out. Now, since we put it below the check to see if the room is on or not, this will exist even if you're outside of a room and if you get into a room, as you can see. But it won't exist obviously on the page or in the part of the page where you're authenticating, because it doesn't make sense to sign out without authenticating first. So what we're going to put over here is we're going to put an on click, and we're going to create this function called sign user out. Now, sign user out is going to be really simple actually. Like the whole functionality for signing out is pretty simple. We're going to say const sign user out. Again, this has to be async. And what we're going to do is over here, we're going to call from Firebase Authentication. So import from Firebase /auth, we're going to import something called sign out. And what we want to import is this function. Oh, I just realized I put a parenthesis over here accidentally. But what we want to import is the sign out, and we're just going to say await sign out, just like this. And this will sign us out as per the Firebase Google authentication part. But we also have to remove our cookie. So we do have to say cookies.remove and remove the auth token from our cookies. And not only that, but we also need to set is auth to false. And in case we are inside of a room, we want to set the room to be equal to null again. So we're going to save this, and you'll see that now if we are over here, we're going to click sign out, and it should have worked. Let's check out why it didn't work. Let's inspect element, go to console, and see what's happening here. So we have a bunch of errors. It says cannot read property undefined. Oh, I know what happened. So we also, for the sign out function over here, we do have to specify our own auth, right? Just like any other method we've imported so far for authentication, we have to say import from Firebase config, and we have to import the auth variable. And then we just pass it on right over here, just like this. We're gonna save this, and now if I click sign out, it should have signed out, but it didn't. Let's try again. Sign out. Yeah, now it works. So now we can refresh the page. We can sign in again to whatever account we want to. Let's do a final run up of the app. I'm going to run into room 2 again, enter the chat. The messages are going to be here. Did we create messages for room 2? I think we did. Wait, let me see. Enter chat. I don't think we did actually. I'm going to write some text. The text, as you can see, appears on both of them. And if I want to sign out, I can just sign out by clicking sign out over here. And it will log me out of this account, but not of this one. If I want to log out of this one, I can click sign out on this one, and the same thing would happen. So this is basically it for the code and for the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like down below and comment what you want to see next. Subscribe, because I'm going to be posting a lot more this year. I feel like the last part of the year last year was really hard for me, and I just ended up not posting as much as I wanted to. But it's going to change. I'm back as strong as I could for this year. And I'm really excited for what is come. So leave a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys want. Subscribe, because I'm going to be posting a lot more. And I see you guys next time.